The fire at the campsite was burning low when the stranger separated from the shadows to join me. The collar of his long coat was turned up against the chill, and his bony fingers clutched a rough rope leash which extended behind him into the gathering night. "Howdy, camper," I grunted, barely taking my eyes off the comforting flames. There was a row of fires burning all along this side of the hill, a testament to how many people had fled the city this weekend in search of peaceful isolation. My old husky lifted her head to sniff the smoky air in the opposite direction of the man, apparently oblivious to his presence. "You lost or something?" I assumed he had just stumbled into the wrong campsite and would soon continue to his own plot, but he maintained his rigid posture at the edge of light. I watched his hands tighten as the rope pulled taut, long fingers remaining clenched as it fell slack again. "You got a dog too?" I broke the silence again, shifting uncomfortably on my uneven stump. "Don't mind Ambus here. Her guard days are over. She's almost blind and won't hear a thing you say unless it's about food." Ambus perked up again, leaning into me as I scratched the thinning fur behind her ear. The man in the coat took a step forward and perched upon a rock, about twice the distance from the fire that I was. His face was sour with pursed lips, the dark stubble on his face doing little to fill his sunken features. He gave a sharp tug on the rope, but it went taut as his animal resisted the effort. I could only distinguish his dog's silhouette in the shadows, but it seemed oddly lumpy and misshapen from here. The man pulled again, viciously this time, like the animal was out of control, even though it was just sitting there on the ground. The animal didn't relent, however, and the man just shook his head and let the rope fall slack again. Ambus used to be like that too, but there isn't much fight left in her now. I chuckled. Ambus was giving into the scratch and had been slowly rolling onto her back to grant me access to her shaggy belly. We used to hike out here all the time when she was younger. There were less people back then, and she could just run without a leash as far as she wanted in any direction. Sometimes I wouldn't see her for an hour, and I'd get so worried, shouting for her until my voice was hoarse. But she always came back, trotting and frolicking, so happy and carefree that I didn't have the heart to stay mad at her. "Wargle," the man spoke at last, a dark and guttural articulation. "What's that now?" "My dog, Wargle. Come, Wargle. The fire won't hurt you." The man pulled again, this time with both hands. A deep, reluctant growl answered him, as though bargaining to be repaid for his troubles. The creature finally consented and plodded up to sit beside him. I laughed when the firelight illuminated the animal wearing a puffy green dragon costume, with soft cloth ridges and wings sewn on the back and sides. The black lab had narrow yellow eyes, which indicated it knew exactly how ridiculous it looked. "Well, no wonder he's not happy," I said. "I'd be embarrassed to be seen in that getup too." "So he doesn't scare the children," the man said. He tried to pat the animal, but the dog growled and bared his teeth until the hand was removed. My husky rolled onto her haunches, crouched and alert. The hair was rising on her back, but I stroked her comfortingly until she settled to the ground. "Well, that's something new for you, isn't it, Ambus? Never seen a dragon before." She did catch a rabbit once though. I saw her chasing it, but never thought she'd actually catch it. I think she was surprised too, because the moment she had it in her jaws, it kicked her in the chest and she dropped it right away. I laughed and leaned back against my hands to stare up at the stars. This is probably the last trip out here for us though. I don't think my heart could bear seeing these hills without her at my side. I tried to laugh again, but the sound came out all wrong. I keep Wargle close too. The man said, he loves me deeply, because he doesn't know any better. Yeah? I didn't know what to say to that. Dogs sure are great like that. The man reached for the dog again, and it snapped at him this time. The man didn't flinch, so I thought the dog was just playing. But when he pulled his hand away, I saw blood flowing freely from a deep gouge in the fleshy base of his thumb. The man stared dispassionately at the red trickle running down his forearm. Are you okay? I asked. The man smiled, and the firelight glistened off his long, sharp canine teeth, filling his mouth. A low growl began rising in his throat. The dog in the dragon costume pulled sharply back on the leash though, just as the man had done to the dog. The jolt was enough to silence the growl from the man, who now stared sullenly at me. Ambus began to howl. She was always a quiet dog, and it had been so long since I heard her make a sound like that I thought I'd heard a woof. She looked like she was getting ready to lunge again, but I grabbed her by the collar and snapped her leash back on. The old dog sprang away, launching herself a few feet before the leash snapped her back to the ground. Ambus, no, leave it. The man began to growl again in response, but the black lab gave another sharp tug on the leash to calm the man. Ambus dropped to my feet and whined, looking at my helpless confusion for guidance. I do so love having an animal companion. Wargle and I, we are going to be together forever. It was the black lab speaking now though, while the man continued to growl. I even caught a glimpse of evenly spaced human teeth in the dog's mouth. Together forever. Would you like that? For her to be like Wargle? The black lab inquired innocently. The voice matched the man perfectly, and my eyes kept flashing between the two to catch how the ventriloquism act was performed. The man's lips were tightly pursed again though, the growl never quite vanishing. I don't want forever. The words caught in my throat. Then you don't love Ambus like I love Wargle. The black lab said. It twisted and pulled, and suddenly the rope slipped free from around its neck. It was advancing, but Ambus was ready. I wasn't expecting how powerfully my old dog launched herself. The leash tore free from numb fingers. I flailed after it, too slow. The two dogs collided beside the fire, interlocking jaws. A howl from Ambus, a human scream from the black lab. They were rolling on the ground now, through the burning embers. Two writhing bodies intermingled in their violent dance. I tried to intervene and pull them apart, but the man was barking and snarling at me now. I could hear Ambus yelp in pain though, prompting me to charge straight at the man blocking my path. He seemed unsteady on his 2 feet and collapsed rapidly, allowing me to leap onto the black lab. I gripped its dragon costume and wrenched it back, but the creature wriggled free at once and leapt on Ambus once more. The green cloth removed. The scattered embers revealed red and black, interlocking scales like those of a serpent running down the creature's hide. The animal's human teeth made it a poor match for my husky though, and the two of us were soon able to overpower the creature. The man had already fled yelping into the darkness by the time I got the two dogs apart. Traitor. The scaled beast howled after its human. Don't you dare run from me, Wargle. With that, the monster sprinted into the night, chasing its human counterpart. I clutched Ambus to me, too afraid to check for her injuries, just holding her and gasping for breath while I listened to shouting slowly disappear. I won't let you go. I need you. Please. I don't want to be alone. Please, Wargle. Please come back. Begging and then screaming. And now softly in the quiet night, I hear the animal crying as a human might, frightened and alone. Or perhaps they have reunited. And it really is the human weeping over how close he came to losing his only companion. Ambus wasn't seriously injured from the fight, and the dog's human teeth only managed to take a small piece of one of her ears. She's sleeping at my side as I write this, whimpering slightly in her sleep. I stroked her to comfort her for a long time, but I've stopped since her patchy hair kept coming out in my hand. Since I felt the scales harding along her skin and hear whispered words smuggled in amongst her quiet whimpering, I won't leave her here, but she might have to wear the dragon costume herself so she doesn't scare the children. I don't want forever, but I'm sure as hell not ready to let go yet. We do what we want. That is the quote that forever haunts my nightmares. It is a quote that has forced me to live by a certain rule. One I haven't broken since I saw that ad. Avoid watching television from 1 to 6 a.m. So you can probably imagine the chill in my spine when my two children Antonella and Pedro retorted the exact phrase to me in defiance of my one rule. We do what we want. This rule stinks. It's just television, Papa. No, it's late and you need to sleep. How will you grow big and strong without your sleep? But just once. No buts. It's already midnight. Mommy will tuck you in. I looked over at my wife, Kay. Not even she understood why I lived by this strange rule. Her honey blonde hair swung back as she picked up Antonella and took the kids to their room. She turned and gave me an affectionate smile. One that told me that she knew everything I did was out of love for my children. That warm expression signaled respect for my strive to be a better parent than my alcoholic ones were. My parents' neglect may be the reason why I loved Cartoon Network and my television so much. It served as my only escape from the nightly arguments, the fists in the wall, and the putrid smell of empty tequila bottles. Luckily, the stars aligned and my childhood took place during a golden era of Cartoon Network, CN City. I could babble forever about the many colorful shows I loved. However, nothing will ever beat the feeling of laying in my pajamas on my bed and watching Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends. It almost always drowned out my parents' loud fights. Besides the main programs themselves, Cartoon Network ran these bumpers of a CGI cartoon city with all the popular characters living together. For me, it was paradise on a screen. However, not even the nostalgia could wipe out the memory of the cursed silhouette. Kay returned to our room, but stood at the door and gave her detective glance. What program traumatized you after 1 a.m.? Straight to the point. That's why I married her. Hee hee. It wasn't a program. It was more of an ad, I guess. Oh, like one of those unsettling anti-smoking ads? Or no, it was a Cartoon Network commercial. But doesn't Adult Swim run during the night block on that channel? Kay's observation was the same one I had that horrible night in 2008. It was the one that told me something was terribly awry. Whenever a young me awoke from a nightmare, my parents were typically out drinking, so no one could really comfort me. How I would have killed for a hug. Thus, I got accustomed to it, so I usually just turned on the tiny TV in my room and fell asleep to whatever program was on. That one night, I followed my standard procedure and turned on my TV to hear a chicken's clucking at the end credits of a Robot Chicken episode. I laughed. Something about the melodic clucking was comforting. The program then transitioned to a strange scene. Not a TV show or an Adult Swim ad either. It was a live-action ad that started with an unsettling fast piano in a child's darkened room. A narrator then uttered, "A father tucks in his child." On the bottom right, I could peer a Cartoon Network logo, but I knew this was not CN time. My Power Rangers alarm read 1:33 a.m. No, something was off about this ad. The unsettling piano continued as a father tucked his child into bed. The piano halted as a brown-haired child, no older than 8, pointed at a pitch-black wall. By this point, I felt uneasy as well. I wish I had instinctively turned off the TV right there and then. But where else was I going to find comfort to go back to bed? I wish I had been brave enough to press that off button on my remote. However, the father calmly went and turned on a lamp. Turning on a light typically means you have warded off evil. It equates to a sense of safety that the darkness and whatever was in there went away. How sorely mistaken I was. The television screen revealed the image of a grotesque black creature with bulging eyes and disproportionate nostrils. It stared directly at the screen as its finger picked at its deformed nostrils. The narrator called it El Coco. However, the ad just went silent and El Coco just stared blankly at the screen. No longer did I see the father or the child, just the creature's dead eyes. The monster, it smiled at me, almost like if it knew I was desperate to rid of it. In an adrenaline rush, I threw myself to the floor and unplugged the television in hopes of ending this nightmare. I looked up and my television was still on, and the monster's smile became wider. Was this some sort of cruel Adult Swim prank? Did I drink my father's tequila before I went to bed? Was I still dreaming? I wanted to scream, but could not, because I froze and realized the monster was lifting a claw and reaching out of the screen. I staggered out of my room like a clumsy child, only to turn my head and see its silhouette forcefully pull itself out of the TV and lurch forward with force. I ran to my empty living room, only lit by the moon's light, and noticed 2 more oddities. The front door was open and a crowbar right next to it. Yet my parents were not home because I would have heard them arguing. The cabinets, which contained jewelry and photos, had also been searched through because the contents were all over the floor. Hey. I turned only to see a man in a mask holding a pistol in a bag. I wish I could have warned him to run, but my fear paralyzed my will to speak. Fuck. A stupid kid is here. You're trembling. Someone is scared of monsters. Now go back to bed and nobody gets hurt," he said as he pointed his pistol at me. I could only raise my trembling arm and point at El Coco. Before he could even register what actually made me tremble, the thief yelped in agony as the monster clawed at his face. He tried to shoot at the creature, but even if it hit, I doubt it staggered it. The thief's cries for help were drowned by this creature's wicked laugh as it dragged him back to my room. This deformed incarnation of a cartoon, whatever it was, chewed through the bones of this thief's arm. I cannot imagine what set of teeth managed to produce that horrifying cracking noise. With one loud slam of my bedroom door, the man's painful shriek stopped, and I heard one last thing from my TV. Cartoon Network. We do what we want. By the time I finished relaying this story to Kay, I was shaking and sweating uncontrollably. She did not stare at me like I was crazy, but instead put her hand on mine and embraced me like my mother never did after a nightmare. I looked back at her beautiful brown eyes. "Sorry to break our silence, but I need some water. I'll be right back." In my heightened sense of awareness, I couldn't fail to notice a dim light coming from the crack of the door leading to my living room. The clock above the door read 1:33 a.m. As I pushed the door open, I saw the television on and heard only static until I finally looked at the screen. The static cleared up to reveal my children's room. The black malformed creature stood there, grinning at the screen and standing directly over Pedro and Antonella. I just wanted some sugar cookies. You know, the powdery ones with icing and sprinkles on top that come in different colors depending on the nearest holiday. I was supposed to be in and out of Walmart in 5 minutes tops, but there was a Karen in line. Don't just take my word for it though. She really wanted people to know that she was none other than Karen Donahue, wife of Ron Donahue, with whom she would jointly rain hellfire and brimstone upon this place if she did not get her refund this instant, at the self-checkout counter, instead of the return center like a normal person. Sensing this might take a while, I pulled out my phone to check the time. 2 p.m. I was planning to chill in the hammock in my backyard after this, if it didn't start raining soon. I'd barely opened the weather app when it got eerily quiet. "Hey, you." I looked up. Karen had pushed her sunglasses past her forehead and rested them on top of her head. Probably to see better, but in the moment, I thought of Cyclops from X-Men, melting people with a gaze. "Stop recording me." I looked around trying to see who she was talking to, and it was unfortunately me. "Don't play dumb with me, young lady. I can see you're trying to humiliate me in front of everybody." I was too shocked to think of a clever comeback. "Ma'am," I stammered. "I promise I'm not. This is an invasion of privacy. I can and I will press charges against you if you don't stop right now. I'm not. Do not interrupt me, you disrespectful. Get back here." I started pacing backwards, not wanting to engage her further. She had other plans. I shoved my phone in my pocket and held my hands up, trying to show her that I couldn't possibly be filming her. "Delete that footage, young lady, or else." "There's no footage. Leave me alone," I cried. "Don't you talk to me like that." She lunged for me, trying to hit me with her purse. I ran. "Yes, I know. I hear you. Why didn't you run for the door?" because the Karen, to beat all Karens, was out for my blood, specifically. And the most direct route away from her also happened to be the one directly opposite from the main door. Okay? Besides, I'm not sure if it would matter much in the long run. Something had just been set in motion that absolutely nothing could have prepared me for. I ran into the clothes aisle and Karen followed, not doing a great job of it. Her big old purse kept snagging on the hangers, and her sunglasses fell off her head more than once. Every time she pushed them back up, she looked angrier at me. Once I lost sight of her, I hard turned into the food section and weaved around a bit before doubling back and making my way to the checkout counter further away. I saw a mostly empty one and stepped in, crouching a bit. The person in front was on their last item and already had their wallet out, so I thought I was in the clear. Searing pain ripped through my scalp as Karen grabbed a fistful of hair and yanked it back. I fell back and landed hard on my ass. I can't remember what she screamed at me, and I don't care. Somehow, I managed to pick myself up and scurry away from her, hoping she'd leave me alone now that she brought me to tears and claimed some of my hair as a souvenir. But no. I made it a few yards away when she began to chase me again. I broke into a run. She just walked, and honestly, that made my blood run cold even more than if she started running after me. It reminded me of something I heard about early humans being very effective endurance hunters. Even if they didn't have tools, they could still chase their prey until it got too tired to keep running. I never truly felt like a prey animal before. I ran towards the nearest exit this time. It was closed. Without missing a beat, I sprinted towards the other exit. As I ran, I looked around at the checkout aisles to see if I could find anyone to help. The checkouts were noticeably emptier than when I first walked in. The only people I could see were pretty far away, and I was almost at the other door, so I didn't waste my breath trying to yell at them for help. I could definitely make it out to my car and out of here before Karen even reached the second exit. That is, I could, if it was open, which it was not. Not even a greeter nearby. What the fuck? I tried prying the door open. They wouldn't budge. Even if I could kick strong, I doubt I'd break whatever the see-through material was. I'm guessing it was engineered to prevent looting or something. Did I mention I'm asthmatic? My throat closes up if I exert myself too much too quickly, like I was doing just then, which is why I left my rescue inhaler at home, because I didn't expect to be running for my life at a fucking Walmart. I saw Karen reach the first set of doors I tried, and I took off again, this time hiding in the produce aisle. Crouching, my breath beginning to whistle, I dialed for 911. I never had to call the police before, so I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was pretty sure it wasn't supposed to ring for that long. Is the line busy? I thought. Are other people here calling the police too? What other people? Another part of me thought, the people in the checkout line, obviously, or the employees. If a customer is harassing them, they might not be able to do anything because of some bullshit policy. But as soon as another customer is involved, then it hit me that I hadn't had to dodge or weave through people at all in the middle of a previously busy day. I checked my phone again. Oh, I'd actually dialed 9111. I dialed the correct number this time, and held the phone to my ear as I steadied my breathing. 911, What's your emergency? Oh, thank God. Please help. Help me, there's a lady. I'm at Walmart. She's trying to kill me. I stammered. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Is there anyone around who can help you? Look around. See if you can run to someone for help. I raised my head a bit to check my surroundings. Nobody. Can you tell us where you are? I told them the store location. Good. Now, where inside the store are you? Produce. But I can't stay. She'll find me. Is there somewhere you can wait for backup to arrive? I racked my brain for an answer. The bathroom? No. Anybody could break into those stalls. And that's the first place she'd look. I could try and escape through the garden section. And weren't there fire exits here somewhere? Ma'am, are you still there? Before I could respond, Karen sauntered into view. The hand still holding a clump of my hair reached out and pointed at my phone. I knew it. You're trying to humiliate me. I'm trying to call the cops. Leave me alone. She paused, and somehow got even redder. She snarled, lunged again, and broke out into, well, not a run, exactly. More like a light jog. But still, she was heading for me faster than before, with fresh hatred and determination. And I could tell that she was looking to rip out way more than just my hair. I ran, sobbing and wheezing. I made it to the other end of the store. The garden center was locked, just as I feared. I collapsed in a pet food aisle nearby. Ma'am, the dispatcher was still on the line. Listen to me. Help is on the way. Can you find some place to hide or something to defend yourself with? I was about to take my chances in the bathroom when it dawned on me. The changing rooms. They have stalls that close up completely. Screw it. Why not? Yeah, I'm gonna try. I lowered my phone's volume as much as I could and put it in my pocket. I tried to listen for signs of Karen. Nothing but my own ragged breath. Nothing at all. Not even music playing on the intercom, I realized. No time to unpack that. I got up and my shoes squeaked slightly on the floor. I took them off and held them under my arm like a football. Then, I began to tiptoe through the dead quiet Walmart. Nothing but the occasional insane hollering from Karen. Miraculously, I made it all the way to the changing room and closed all the stall doors before getting in one myself and locking the door. I pulled out my phone and realized that I accidentally ended the call at some point. And then I heard Karen stomping around nearby. So I just sat still and prayed she wouldn't think to look here. Well, she hasn't yet, so that's nice. I typed this up while waiting for help to arrive, but so far, nothing. I'm just glad I went to the bathroom before I left my house. I have an idea of what to do next, and hopefully I'll update this soon with some good news. But for now, I just want to get this out there. If you're shopping somewhere and you see a Karen, get the hell out while you still can. Something happened to me a few weeks ago that I planned to keep a secret, but recently it had been eating away at me and I needed to speak about it. The situation involves the dark web, but it isn't like all the other stories you hear of. Some unsuspecting soul learning of the dark web through a friend, going on it for the first time and browsing around until they inevitably come across some horrifying page that leave them sleepless for nights. No, This is the opposite. To be honest, I'm actually the one who would be terrifying these curious souls. You see, I'm a dark web prankster, meaning I spend my free time on the dark web messaging with unsuspecting strangers. I join chat rooms and send them links to gory but obviously fake videos. I play similar videos in place of my webcam in private chats, tricking the other user into thinking they are chatting with a psychopathic killer. My favorite trick, though, is taking control of their cursor, manipulating the chat room and making the site unclosable unless they turn off their machine. This one gets the most screams and appalled expressions, and it is all achieved through running some simple bash scripts. Now, some people may think this is cruel, but I see it as a service. A free one at that. You see, these people come onto the dark web for these kind of experiences. They hear somebody tell a scary story of their experience on the big bad dark web, and they want to be able to tell similar stories in a sad attempt to be interesting. They come looking to be terrified, and I ensure they aren't disappointed. Of course, I get my own enjoyment out of it, so it's a win-win. But recently, this has all changed. If you fly too close to the sun, you will eventually be burned. I am burning. The night started like any other. I got back from work, made some dinner, and after washing up, I logged onto my PC and got to work. I jumped around a few chat rooms, but they were unusually quiet or taking way too long to connect. And when they did connect, people left before I got a chance to mess with them. Eventually, I was able to keep someone around for more than a few seconds. They were some bald dude with a gnarly scar across their nose. His ears and face were both heavily pierced, and he had a python tattoo wrapped around his neck. A tough guy. They were always fun to make cry like a baby. The way I usually do these pranks is I keep the screen blank until I see the person. Then I choose from the collection of cam clips I have and slowly escalate it from there. For this specific instance, I chose a clip of a cute girl who starts by smiling and waving. The man smiled back and began typing until a message popped up. "Hi, you are cute. Thank you. I like your tattoo." We went back and forth typing and discussing ourselves until I decided to start the fun. I took down the video of the girl and replaced it with a video that starts with a man tied to a chair. A masked man then begins to beat the man in the chair with a hammer. To my surprise, the man didn't seem horrified. Instead, he began to wholeheartedly laugh before sending another message. Funny, but I preferred the lady. I replied telling him to shut up or the girl will get it next. Once that message sent, the man's laughter stopped, and he began to stare into the camera with a cold, emotionless gaze. "You shouldn't be so rude." That message was the beginning of the end for my pranking. He began to type again, and when he stopped, my jaw dropped and my fun was over. He sent the message and it was my full name. I quickly moved my cursor up and tried to exit out of the chat, but my cursor froze before dissipating before my very eyes. I opened my console and began to frantically type some commands, but each one was denied. Slowly, the chat began to turn black with red fun. I was in a full-blown panic now. My heart was racing and I felt like I had spikes sticking into my arms, legs, and neck. I couldn't control my breathing, and I was sweating profusely. All the while, that psycho was smiling into the camera, his dirty yellow teeth glaring at me as he continued to type. Let's have a look, shall we? The light from my webcam lit up, and sure enough, down in the left-hand corner of the screen was my terrified face, staring aimlessly at the screen. My brain was screaming instructions at me, but my body couldn't react. I was frozen in fear. Eventually, I snapped out of it and stood up to turn off my computer when he screamed in a deep, grisly, distorted voice. Wait. This stopped me in my tracks. I looked back at the screen and he was gone, but only momentarily. When he returned, he was standing up, leaning over directly into the camera. He lifted his hand balled in a fist and opened it, revealing multiple human teeth, which fell from his hand and bounced off the desk beneath. He then sent the last message. "See you soon, boy." He smiled as the words in the chat room began to fall off the screen, as a loud screeching noise blared from my speakers. Just then, my computer switched itself off, leaving me standing staring at my reflection on the darkened monitor. I must have stood there for at least 5 minutes before I snapped out of it and went to bed. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his horrifying smile, and I heard that disgusting sound of the teeth hitting the desk. I called in sick to work the next day so I could try to relax, and I went for a run to clear my head. It helped enormously, and 3 days later, I had put the whole experience behind me. However, a week ago, about 10 days after the incident, something happened which has made me tell this story. At about 1 a.m., I was awoken by some strange banging sounds. I got up in a haze and looked out the front window to see an old maroon-colored Toyota Camry parked right behind my car, blocking it in. The banging had stopped, but the strange car had put me on edge. I had lived in the neighborhood for a few years, and I never once saw this car. I put on some clothes and began to walk down my stairs and towards the front door. But as I did, the banging began again. It was coming from the back door. I slowly walked towards the door, my heart racing. The closer I got, the louder the bangs. Whatever was causing it was trying to smash the door off its hinges. I wanted to scream, "Get the hell away from my house." However, for once in my life, I made the smart decision and ran up my stairs and into my bedroom before barricading my door and calling 911. The operator picked up just as I heard the window smash from downstairs. "There's a man in my house. He's trying to kill me," I screamed before she responded, telling me to calm down and to tell her my location. She asked me to stay on the line and that a squad car was close by. I heard heavy footsteps stomping up my stairs and towards my door before stopping. The operator asked me if I was still there, but before I could answer her inquiry, the man started to attempt to knock down my bedroom door. The bangs on the door were deafening. The operator kept pushing me to respond, but I couldn't. I was transfixed on the door and how with every sickening thud, that psycho got closer and closer. Suddenly I could hear sirens in the distance and the banging stopped, followed by the sound of quick steps speeding down the stairs, and shortly after, the sound of a car starting and speeding away. A few minutes later, the lights from sirens illuminated my room. This broke me out of my frozen, fearful state. I moved the barricade and ran down my stairs and out the front door to the police. They questioned me for some time and searched around my house. They found shoe and axe marks on both doors. My bedroom door had a massive hole in it from where the lunatic was cutting it. I gave them a full statement and told them everything. When all was finished, they drove me to my friend's house as I couldn't stay at mine anymore. The next day I rang my landlord and canceled my tenancy, which cost me my deposit and a cancellation fee. I've been staying with my friend while I look for a new place. I haven't been sleeping at all. I'm terrified that that psycho will find me again. The police found no evidence that could be used to find him, but the Camry. But there are thousands of them in the state alone. I fear for my life every day, and I'm unsure if I'll ever be safe again. Stay off the dark web. It is mostly used by jokesters, but it only takes one wrong click to put your life in danger. There used to be a small YouTube channel called Sam's Online Food Review. It was run by my best friend, Sam Ryder, a channel full of videos that consisted of Sam eating and reviewing food and drink before a camera. His channel garnered around 10,000 subscribers, which although wasn't huge, it was big enough for Sam to be dedicated to it. I can recall numerous times of sitting in the passenger seat of his car, staying out of his shot, as moments prior he announced he wanted to video himself trying something he picked up in the store, only moving after he signed off with his signature, thumbs up or thumbs down, and his catchphrase, "I like it," or "I loathe it." He was liked for his friendly attitude and happy all-around good guy persona. He was well received by his audience. Rarely were there any hate comments, and when there was, Sam would shrug them off and keep smiling. Sam was always smiling. Sam's Online Food Review went dark 7 months ago. No warning, no notice, just deactivated. I didn't hear or see from Sam despite numerous phone calls and house visits to no avail. 6 days after his channel was deleted, I called the police to do a welfare check on Sam. I was worried he had fallen ill or hurt himself. The police made entry into his property and found nothing, and Sam was declared a missing person. A week after Sam was declared missing, a dog walker discovered a horrifically mutilated corpse on a railway line. The body had severe lacerations all around the head, arms, chest, and legs, and almost cut in two across the waist. The decomposing internal organs splayed out of the gruesome V-shaped cut. The autopsy report noted that although no direct cause of death could be confirmed, it was likely the large slit in the throat that brought on death. The autopsy also turned up questionable findings, including the body missing its stomach and heart, long strips of flesh removed off the chest, arms, and lower back, and that the body was exsanguinated. The scene wasn't remarkably bloody, yet the body was almost completely drained of blood. 2 weeks later, the police had identified the deceased. Despite the damage that had occurred to the corpse, the teeth were intact enough to get a viable reference for dental records. My worst fears for Sam were released. It was him. The police investigated, but could not find forensic evidence of any other person being on the scene. They eventually came to the conclusion that he was hit by a passing freight train. The lacerations and disembowelment attributed to being dragged under, and the missing organs explained away as being eaten by wildlife. A fox maybe. Sam's mother decided it was best to cremate what remained of her only son. I stood next to her as the beach coffin was pulled into the large furnace. As the doors closed and the gas jets ignited with a whoosh, she broke down into tears, and so did I. I stood there sobbing for the entire 90 minutes it took for one of the people I grew up with and shared so many memories with was vaporized. I mourned my friend and done my best to move on, and it was going well, I got distracted, got a new job, started dating a girl I met through my work. A few months passed, and even though I missed Sam, things were going well. Right up to the point when I was browsing Reddit at 3 a.m. that I received a Facebook message from the account of my dead friend. I froze, seeing his profile picture in the messenger bubble, a picture taken during good times. Sam's wide smile plastered on his face. I felt a sudden chill. A profound sense of fear enveloped me. You know the fear that makes you cold and your limbs ache as the slow drip of adrenaline spreads throughout your body. With dread, I opened the message. It was a link to a file sharing website. I stared at the seemingly random amalgamation of numbers and letters that made up the URL. My head racing through what the hell was on the other side of the link. And more importantly, why did my dead friend send me it? My hand seemingly on autopilot brought the cursor above the link. With my gut instinct screaming no, I clicked on the link. Before my finger had lifted from the click, I immediately regretted what I just did. Chrome opened a new tab to the website. The screen was gray, apart from a black rectangle in the middle of the page which had a play button over it. I stared at it, unwilling to click. What I was scared of, I did not know. Around 10 seconds had passed, then the screen refreshed. Instead of the play button, the rectangle had the words autoplaying in 5 seconds in bright white. I watched as the numbers counted down, trying to understand what was going on. An abrupt buzzing noise made me jump. The video began to play. The camera was pointed at what appeared to be a grimy white tiled surface. I could hear the sound of muffled whimpering followed by footsteps of someone approaching the camera. There was some slight rusting noise as the camera was adjusted. The screen blurred out as the camera was turned. When the camera was back into focus, I let out a choked gasp. In the middle of a white-tiled room, Sam lay on his back on a stainless steel table. His eyes wide in pure unfiltered terror. The light of a single bulb hanging over the table reflected off the sheen of sweat that coated his forehead. His naked chest rising and falling rapidly in panic. He looked into the camera and attempted to yell. The noise, muffled by a tight cloth gag that was bound around his head. His hands were also bound together tightly with duct tape. I stared at the screen, feeling increasingly sick. My brain failing to grasp what was going on. Before I could even comprehend what was happening, the sound of Sam squirming and whimpering was interrupted by a high pitch. Welcome to Sam's online food reviews. Today we have a special treat. The mocking tone came from behind the camera. Sam's panic increased. He started jerking his body, trying to free his hands. The voice continued. Today we will try what is considered a delicacy in many countries, although usually a forbidden one that is. The camera zoomed out slightly, and a man appeared in the frame, standing in front of Sam. He was dressed in a white coat with a red striped apron on. He wore a butcher's hat and a cloth face mask. In his rubber-gloved hands, he held a large red-handled butcher's scimitar, and in the other, he held a sharpening rod. The man started running the knife up and down the blade in a smooth fashion, the steel on steel making a smooth shk, shk, shk noise. Sam's panicked muffled yells growing stronger. The man placed down the sharpening rod and walked around the table. Sam turned his head and started what sounded like a desperate pleading with the man. "Poor little lamb," the man cooed. "It won't hurt long and you'll be delicious. Even from here, I could see that tears filled my friend's eyes. As he struggled, the man rolled Sam onto his front and pulled his head over the edge of the table. The man then walked out of shot and returned with a metal bucket. He placed it on the floor below Sam's head. In a swift motion, he grabbed his hair and lifted his head and started cutting. Crimson burst from his neck and splashed over the bucket and onto the floor. My friend's body jerking uncontrollably as blood spewed out of his neck like a volcanic eruption. As I watched this happen, I threw up. I fell out of my chair in horror. I pulled myself away, not able to see anymore. I fell again by the door. The speakers of my computer loud enough to hear what sounded like slicing and grunting. I lay curled up in the corner sobbing amidst a panic attack. The minutes feeling like hours. When the sound stopped, I shakily got up and walked to my computer. Avoiding the pool of sick on the floor, I forced myself to look at the screen. The page had closed, and Chrome displayed the Reddit screen. The Facebook tab had one notification. I didn't want to click it, but I willed myself to. It was a message from Sam. I like it. I need sleep, but whenever I close my eyes, I see it. I must share this burden with someone. My life is now a waking nightmare because of that terrible video. I found it online, on the dark web. You know what I'm talking about. The place where drug dealers and pedophiles rub elbows with arm merchants and killers for hire. The place where terrorists conspire and all sorts of ugly rumors roam. I thought it would be a good idea to visit this place. My purpose? Call it morbid curiosity. I was looking for the most extreme content I could find. Snuff movies, red rooms, all the bad things commingled in one place. I consider myself a student of the human condition and am fascinated by the man's darker urges, his apparent hatred of himself. I wanted to plumb the depths of his sickness and see what I could find. Knowledge for its own sake, or something. I come from a wealthy family and have never known want. I knew I would have to pay for my curiosity. So I purchased several $1,000s worth of crypto in advance. I will not go into details of accessing the dark web. If you have the desire, it only takes a little bit of research. Seek, and you shall find. In my search, I scoured various message boards covering many distasteful topics, such as cannibalism. I chatted with several strange individuals, most of whom were disrespectful of my direct approach in seeking what I sought. A few offered to make a trade, but wanted me to show them something first. I, however, had nothing to offer, except money. I was burned more than a few times, but I'd anticipated as much. After more than 2 weeks of searching and being continuously ripped off, I finally came across something interesting. The promise of a genuine red room. That is to say, a live-streamed murder. After a days-long conversation with a friendly stranger on a rather disturbing message board, I was provided with a link to this livestream. He assured me it was genuine and unlike anything I'd ever seen. It cost me a mere $500, and I have no doubt what I saw was real. If you saw it, you would know too. The scene began abruptly with the camera displaying a large, windowless room with high ceilings. Mulch covered the floor. What appeared to be a giant rock took up one corner and opposite, this was a kid's swimming pool filled with water. Jesus Christ, how could I have known what was about to happen? A portion of the ceiling suddenly opened and a woman, upside down, was lowered into the room. She was suspended by the feet from what looked like giant forceps. She writhed. Her hands were bound behind her back and tape covered her mouth. Needless to say, she was visibly terrified. Nothing happened for a few seconds. Then, from under the rock, a head appeared. It was a snake. An anaconda, I believe. Slowly, so slowly, it emerged from its hide, forked tongue tasting the air. The girl's eyes bulged from her head with the most intense shock I had ever seen. The snake continued its creeping advance. It was massive. It had to be at least 50 feet long. One gigantic flowing muscle. I had never seen a snake so big. It was an absolute monster if there ever was one. The snake's face rose to within inches of hers, tongue darting in and out. It loomed above her, all coiled aggression. Mercifully, the woman fainted. Whatever was holding the forceps began to shake the woman, like someone dangling a toy in front of a cat. The snake's head pulled back slightly, tongue still flickering. It remained still for a moment, and then it struck. Its jaws clamped down on her throat, and its body whipped around her with lightning speed. It took her to the floor and proceeded to squeeze the life from her as the giant forceps were lifted from the room and the ceiling panel replaced by unseen hands. I watched stunned as the snake uncoiled and released its teeth from her throat. It then unhinged its jaw and began to swallow her whole, a hideous lump working its way down the length of the snake's body. The entire process could not have taken more than 20 minutes. Afterwards, I sat in silence for what seemed like hours, trying to process what I had just watched. My conscience gnawed at me to do something. That poor woman was in the springtime of her life, and others could be in danger of the same ghastly fate. This had to be reported. I looked down at the wet circle on my crotch and sighed. I paid for this, and I was just as guilty as the psychopaths who made this film. I could never go to prison. I looked up at the screen. Thank you for purchasing Death by Beast. Next week, watch a frenzy of tiger sharks rip apart a Brazilian volleyball team. Only $999. Click here to order now. That was 1 week ago. The shark video is starting in a few minutes. I imagine it will be quite horrific, and I have a heavy feeling in the pit of my stomach, but I'm also trembling with anticipation. Can you imagine the carnage? I know I shouldn't watch, but this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. And now, I have someone to share my burden with. I hope you will lend me your ear again, since I doubt sleep's comfort will visit me tonight. But with your help, maybe I'll sleep tomorrow night, or the next night, or the next. I don't know if this is the right place to post this, but I just need to share. It started with the move. I wanted to get away from the city, from the noise, from people. I wanted to leave the apartment we had. Looking around at the apartment, memories would drift into my view like a black mist, creeping into my vision. Memories of times I spent with her, joyous ones, uncomfortable ones, painful ones, all bringing in with the feeling of a hollowness, a darkness, an unrelating pain. Losing a loved one is the most painful thing one can go through. A child, a parent, a close friend, a wife. I lost myself for a while. I'd find myself curled up on the sofa, clean sheets of our bed, crying harder than I thought possible, unsure of how long I'd been there. I didn't eat, but I drank. It was the only way I could put myself to sleep, to embrace the comfort of darkness. My phone had been ringing all hours of the day. My parents eventually called the police. They broke the door down to find me huddling on the floor, clutching a bottle, next to a pile of my own vomit. I thought of suicide, but I didn't want anyone to feel how I was feeling then. I still see her face sometimes, a glance out of my peripheral vision, but accompanied by something much darker. But now's not the time for that. I left our New York apartment in September. I was a trader at the firm my father is the CEO of. I won't tell you which one for obvious reasons. It was small, but I had too much money. I still feel guilty that we didn't lead a simpler life, happier, out somewhere upstate. We talked about it, but we never did it. I met her at a bar of all places. She came from a poor family, and my parents weren't exactly thrilled with our marriage. But I didn't believe in love until I met her. She was everything to me. I felt that she wanted me to move upstate, to find a new wife, start a family, and live for the both of us. I sublet the apartment we had in Manhattan that I'd been given by my father as a wedding gift. I know what you're probably thinking about me, and I think a lot of you would be right. I don't consider myself a bad person. I was respectful and loving to my wife, compassionate to my friends, but I was a ruthless asshole in my job. Traded whatever would make the firm the most, ignoring what I was contributing to. As I said, I feel guilt. I quit soon after she died, my father buying me out. I drove upstate, found a real estate agent, and bought a house. I got our best furniture moved up. I drove the important stuff up myself. It's a gorgeous property, 125 acres, lots of trees, and even a brook running through the woods. The house was the real prize though. Very old, red brick, accented with a wraparound porch, French windows painted white, and even a wrought iron balcony. Inside there are 3 bedrooms, 2 fireplaces, a living room, lounge, dining room, a beautiful kitchen. It is very cozy. However, this house made the grief much worse back then, as you'd imagine. I had enough savings to live a comfortable life, all the way to the end, but it felt like it was already over. Boxes littered the living room, surrounding the couch I slept on. After a couple of months, I was functioning, barely. I could manage to get food, and even cook for myself some nights. I watched old movies on my phone after the Wi-Fi was set up, and read as much as possible. Only books I'd read before though. I didn't need anything new, anything unexpected that might have pushed me over the edge. It was a cold night in December when I first encountered it. I was laying on the couch in front of the fire, reading an old fantasy novel I liked as a kid. I had a glass of whiskey next to me. but this is one of my stable days, if you could call it that. I heard something in the sink in the kitchen fall over just opposite of me, and as I lowered the book from my eyes, I caught a glimpse of her face. For a split second, I felt her, and I felt a small warmth. Rushing now, I raised the book a bit lower, but she was gone, but replaced with something else. My heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. I felt hollow. I felt lost and depressed and hopeless, like I'd never feel happy again. And I saw it. It was blacker than black. It seemed to absorb all the light around it, its shape cut into space itself. It looked like her. It had her shape. No features, but I could see her flowing hair, and I dropped my book and screamed. I screamed like I never screamed before. Tears rushed from my eyes as I fell off the couch. Getting up and moving away, looking at the thing, it started to walk closer to me, threatening me with its shadow. I wanted it to stop. I wanted it to go. I shouted at it to leave, to go. I shoved it, and it just ran into me. From 3 feet away, it felt like being hit by a freight train. I brought my arms up, but it was a futile attempt. It slammed into me, knocking me back into the wall. I felt its darkness, its hollowness. It struck me in the chest, over and over. I thrashed my arms to get it to stop, but the harder I fought back, the harder it hit me. With every hit, I felt all the pain I had felt since her death, all at once. I had no will to live anymore. In that moment, I wanted nothing more than to die. I stopped moving and looked up at it. It was standing there, looking at me with non-existent eyes. Through all the pain and all the grief, I don't know why I did what I did next. Maybe it was because I wanted to die. Maybe it was because it had her form. It all felt too familiar. I stood up and embraced the blackness. I felt like I was falling through a huge void, flailing my limbs as I tried to hold on to something that could stop this pain. And then, a light. The dark figure stepped back as I saw a light forming in the center of its dark face. It was her. I reached out and felt it. There was pain, but also something that could be called happiness. It was painful, but there nonetheless. The darkness started to shift and then just evaporated. That night was 3 years ago. I'm doing well now. I met a lovely woman and I plan on asking her to marry me. If you told me that night this is where I'd be, I wouldn't have believed you. Maybe you don't even believe me, but I've had help. I saw the dark figure more and more after that. Every time we would embrace, and that light inside it grew larger and larger. And now I don't see the dark figure anymore. I see my wife, as beautiful as the day I met her. I still cry. I still hurt. But that blackness has been reduced to a mere shadow, engulfing me every time I see it. My shadow, my darkness. But even when the shadow's there, I smile, because I know the light is her. As more time passes and I move on with my life, the shadow has been shrinking. That shadow is becoming less and less of me. A bitter part and otherwise happy memories I have of me and her, of us. I only looked once. The first time I heard tapping on my window, it was very faint and very slow, slowly turning around in my bed, my eyes focused on the window, and I regret it now. If I just hadn't looked, so much could be different. The sight made my skin around my eyes stretch backwards and away further than they'd ever gone, my mouth widening to release the loudest scream, but no noise coming out. My pupils growing thinner until they were mere dots, my neck pushing backwards to get away. We stared for minutes. I discontinued it as a bad dream. The next day, just before midnight, I clearly heard steps outside my window, like a horse galloping. I shoved my head under my blanket and tried my hardest to still myself. The tapping began. It was louder and faster than last time. Minutes pass and the tapping stops. When I wake up the next day, I walk around to my backyard. Beneath my window, there are large footprints, large enough to fit my palms spread out with a bit of space still left. They're in front of my window, but nowhere else, as if they just came into existence. I called the cops. They arrived later that night and stand guard. The tapping never came that night. I fell asleep in peace, and clutch of hope tells me things are going to be fine. Eventually the cops leave. I wake up in the middle of the night. It's pitch black outside. I heard loud disgruntled tapping on my window. The tapping is more forceful than before. I can hear the window shaking. I know something is staring at the little lump in the bed with sullen eyes. The large pit in my stomach told me so. I don't know why, but I'm still. It feels comfortable, I guess. A delusion telling me it can't see me if I'm just still enough. But I can't help but breathe. And the breathing makes me rock slightly up and slightly down. The tapping stops eventually, and when I wake up, I feel like a wreck. I call the cops again, but this time, they're not nearly as recipient. Things can't go on like this. I think to myself and head out. There's a forest beside my house. It's filled with close trees, lush leaves, green and orange bushes, and tall thick grass. I know the tapping comes from there. I know it for a fact. If I can find where the tapping comes from. I put on my thick green jacket, my heavy black boots, and snatched my camera. The tracks must have been hidden, but not perfectly. I see trampled plants, broken sticks, destroyed mushrooms. This would look common in any other scenario, but to me, right now, it's clues. I see a cave opening. It's a black door of air rimmed by gray pointy stone. I hear a distant noise as I approach it. It sounds like an old man, with a high-pitched voice, heaving loudly. I've never heard anything like it. My gut feels sick. The sound is just wrong. I take a step into the cave. My leg disappears into the cold abyss, as if the darkness bit it off. A spark of energy shoots through my body. Everything in me is begging me not to go in. I take a few steps, and the darkness envelops me. I tried feeling my way forward, and then my legs hit up against something, and I tumbled down the cave until I hit up against a wall. The heaving turned into heavings. I could hear it all around. I grabbed my camera and took a shot towards the noise. The flash lit up the corridor. I caught my gasp. On the floor, layers of people with horns lay asleep. Their feet are covered in goat hair. I got a picture. I'm getting out. I permanently put on the light to not step on anyone. I figured shining some light is better than stepping on them, and I slowly snuck my way out of the cave. As I was about to exit the cave, I saw a distracting light and accidentally stepped on a pebble. I heard the pebble fall down the cave and bump into something. The creature wakes up with a shriek, waking everyone else up. I sprint away. I'm sitting in my living room, covered by my blanket, and I'm shaking. I don't know what to do. They stopped tapping. They're banging. They're banging on my door. They're banging on every window. Some of them are screeching. Their banging grows louder and louder. Their screech is more horrible. I feel like they're going to shatter my windows any second now. I'm breathing too fast, hyperventilating. It goes out and in. I can't control myself. Just stop. Please stop. I'll remove the pictures, I swear. I hear sirens in the distance. The banging stops. I hear them running towards the forest. Thank God, I'm saved. My neighbor had called the cops. I fumble out to explain what happened. I can barely describe the thoughts in my head when the officer grabs my shoulder and tells me to calm down. I show him the pictures on my phone. He looks at them curiously before dismissing them as fake. They drive away. I'm not sure what to do. I don't know what they want from me. I'm sitting on my chair, staring at my window. I don't care anymore. I look them in the eyes, recognize them. I can't live the rest of my life in fear. I cannot and I will not. The clock ticks. Each second draws us closer to midnight. I feel myself want to get into bed and cover my head. But no, I won't do it this time. I'm going to look. Even if it's the end of me, I will look. I blink and they're all standing there. 5 large, tall, hollowed out faces staring right at me. We make eye contact, but I hold my ground. They're angry. They're showing their teeth. They bring their large rotten hands up to the window. Nails that have grown for ages are on them. They bang, and they bang, and for 3 minutes, they're banging on my window. A sprick appears on the window like lightning. Then another one, and then the window shatters. They reach for me with their long hands and grab me, pulling me out. I scream and jerk and kick, but it doesn't matter. I'm one of them now. I don't know what they did exactly, but I've changed. I'm no longer human. I no longer have 5 fingers. I feel my consciousness, my humanity, fading away. I'm typing this up on my phone while I still can. I have a warning for all of you. If you hear tapping on your window, don't look. Shout out to my superfans, Sweet Black Swan, Tacey, and Brooklyn. I really appreciate you guys supporting my channel, and I really look forward to making more content for everyone.